I've been walking these streets for 25 years, pounding the pavements. I know what's going on in the back rooms. I know what's going on in the boardrooms. What's the Deal is the place where the purple people hang out. We're the only show on television that allows a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent to come down and talk it out. The #1 show on television that always focuses on crypto. We tell you what's the real deal.
Everything is a fantasy. And now the truth is out in his book.
I don't wear a pink hat. I don't need to wear a pink hat.
Well, you have such beautiful hair. Why
Thank you,
would you
darling.
wear a pink hat? Welcome to this week's edition of What's the Deal? I'm John Tobacco. Every week in the beginning of the show, I try to give you my 2 cents where I weigh in on what's happening in the news. And I've been doing this now for 6 months. We've been bringing you the other perspective. The left-wing media wants to tell you about collusion, obstruction of justice, synergy, cooperation, collaboration, all this stuff. After 2 years and $40 million, Robert Mueller's report is in. And the main thing that he was charged with looking after was no collusion. For months now, we've been bringing you the other side of the story with guests like Jerome Corsi, who was caught up and offered a guilty plea by Mueller and his investigators, and now seems to be home free. Just a few months ago on What's the Deal, here's what Jerome Corsi said about collusion.
It's a nice theory, but it isn't true.
Okay, Jerome Corsi, thank you for that. We also got out of the studio. We went down to Florida and went to see our good friend Roger Stone. We talked about the Stone Defense Fund because the one person who got caught up is supposedly in the middle of this, charged with only administrative crimes, is Roger Stone. And even though the Mueller probe is over, Roger Stone is still facing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in a trial set to begin November 7th. Will he get a pardon? We don't know. But when it came down to collusion, Roger Stone told What's the Deal exactly this.
Robert Mueller and his colleagues have probed into every aspect of my life, and they still have no evidence whatsoever of Russian collusion.
And then finally, this week, an exclusive, in-depth interview with George Papadopoulos. So while the left-wing media is telling you all this crap about subpoenas and about how they're going to do more investigation, somehow or another, partisan efforts of the House of Representatives are going to yield us results that $50 million and 2 years did not yield in the Mueller report. And one thing the left-wing media keeps conflating, they keep saying, well, if he wasn't sure about obstruction, he should have sent it to the House like they've done in the past. No. In the past, there was an independent counsel. The independent counsel reported to the House of Representatives. That law is gone. Robert Mueller was empowered under a special counsel who does not report to Congress, does not report to the House. The special counsel is part of the Department of Justice, and the special counsel reports his results to the Attorney General, Bob Barr, which he did, and Bob Barr has weighed in. He says he'll come up with a redacted version within the next couple of weeks. The left is going crazy. We'll see how it all pans out. But Donald Trump says release the report. Barr says he's going to release the report. And coming up next, we're going to talk about no more collusion. What's Donald Trump doing next? Next on the list, healthcare. That's my 2 cents. Tonight, we have the executive director of the Heritage Action Foundation. Tim Chapman joins us in the leadoff spot. Tim, thanks for giving us a few minutes.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Sometimes in the media, the think tanks get a little bit of a bad rap. But you guys are out there as part of the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Action is an arm of that does some great things. I know in the past, Heritage and others have helped Trump and the administration pick judges and do other great stuff that people that want to make America great again are happy about. Tell us, we get past all the rhetoric that's out there and we drill down into what the real deal is. Tell us what Heritage Action is all about and what you're doing for America.
So the Heritage Foundation was started in the 1970s, and it was started with a very simple idea. That was to take conservative ideas and make them actionable on Capitol Hill so that we produce outcomes in terms of laws that we pass through Congress. But what we've done now with Heritage Action as a sister organization is we've built a grassroots army across the country. People who are really engaged, who really care about seeing this country go in the right direction. Many of whom came out in droves in the 2016 election and who we really need to come out again in the 2020 election. So we work with those grassroots activists across the country to advocate for those kind of limited government, free enterprise, in individual liberty defense principles that we care about.
Some people say that, you know, these think tanks, they have too much power. Do you think it could get out of control with the power that think tanks have, or do you think it's a good measure that we need in place?
So what we've tried to do is we've tried to make the power come from the activists across the country, individual citizens who care enough to give up their time. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there is some room for criticism of think tanks in Washington, and not just think tanks in Washington, but of the entire kind of lobby infrastructure in Washington. That is a problem. The solution to that is opening it up by engaging people across the country, giving them a voice in Washington. That's what we're trying to do.
So you guys are not taking these big hunks of money and just running down there and lobbying the policymakers for some big money ideas. You guys are setting grassroots organizations throughout the country that aggregate ideas and kind of report up to a local organization, and that kind of funnels up to what conservatives want to see in policy, right? It's not just this concentrated group of money men.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So if you look at a typical lobbying organization in Washington, whether it's a corporate lobbying arm or a lobbying firm, they will, on their quarterly reports, they'll list clients. Okay, this person's paying us this much and this one's paying us this much. We don't list a single client. We don't have a client. Our client are ideas, right? Ideas that we care about and believe in. And then the people we work with to achieve that are the citizens across the country.
In the perfect world of Heritage Action, what would healthcare look like?
So what we want to do is there's this entire set of regulations that Obamacare put in place. It's an infrastructure that they erected under the Democratic leadership that put all these onerous burdens on healthcare across this country. And so it put burdens on states in particular, and it made the market kind of tight so that costs are going up. And what we want to do is we want to take that infrastructure and we want to begin to dismantle it. And we want to allow states to have the flexibility that they need to innovate at the state level. And so we want to say, look, New York, if New York wants to have a certain kind of healthcare market, they should be able to do that. And if Texas wants a different kind, they should be able to do that. And then what we'll do is people will hold their local elected officials accountable to make sure that that market works. We want to push the decision-making down to the state level. We think that's a healthier thing for the country, and we think ultimately it will provide lower costs in healthcare and better quality.
With the Democrat House, is there any chance we can get a bipartisan agreement on healthcare in your view?
I think it's very slim that we would get a bipartisan agreement. I think, what the Democrats want, the Democrats have a fundamentally different philosophy than we do about this. What I was talking about earlier in terms of trying to allow states to have flexibility and innovation, they don't want that. They want a one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare. And where they're headed ultimately is a Medicare for all socialized system. That's where they want to go, and there are varying degrees of that. And we just think that if you go in that direction, you're going to, look at what's happening in some of these countries, overseas, with the terrible cost, with the long waiting lines, with the poor quality of care. We think if you go in the Democrats' direction, that's a bad thing for the country. So I don't see a compromise being brokered here. I think this becomes an issue that we talk about going into the 2020 elections. And I think, frankly, the president was smart to put some focus on this. A lot of people say that even some of the Republicans in the Senate said, hey, he shouldn't have done that. We let the Democrats hang themselves on the issue. But no, he's got to have something to say we stand for when they're talking about what they want.
Well, every time they run out of issues, they start banging the healthcare drum and doing the fear mongering. Yeah. I call it. You're going to lose your healthcare. 20 million people. Yeah. What's the one big idea that people are not hearing about that you guys want to do to help America?
Well, I think the biggest issue that we need to tackle is we need to think about how the people who came into our coalition in 2016 behind President Trump, working class Americans across this country, who in previous elections voted for President Obama, who 10% of whom voted for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary, we've got to figure out how to keep them in the coalition. They left the Democrats for a reason, and the Democratic Party was failing them on all sorts of levels. The Republican Party has to find a way to keep them. They're on rent right now. They're not a permanent part of the Republican coalition. this party needs to take working class issues seriously and figure out how to keep them.
Tim, I want to thank you very much for joining us on What's the Deal. We did it again. We bring you the people that know where the rubber meets the road. Tim's in the trenches. He's fighting for you. He's fighting for America. The Heritage Foundation, Heritage Action are out there at the grassroots level bringing ideas to the top, the ideas of their customers, and you, me, and American patriots are the benefactors. I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight on What's the Deal. I want to thank you for watching this segment with Tim Chapman. And stay tuned. Coming up next, George Papadopoulos and Mrs. Papadopoulos on What's the Deal, the show that doesn't need. Joining us on What's the Deal, it's George Papadopoulos. George, thanks a lot for joining us. The former advisor to President Trump. Right now, he's the author of Deep State Target, How I Got Caught in the Crosshairs of the Plot to Bring Down Donald Trump. How does a guy like you, who's made a career of being respectable in the business world and the politics world, get dragged into the Mueller probe?
That's a great question. By the time I actually got involved with the Trump campaign, we now figured out by Devin Nunes recently that there was an active investigation, whatever that even means, into the Trump campaign by late 2015, early 2016. I joined the campaign in March 2016. So by the time I get there, they're throwing various assets at me. This guy, this professor, Joseph Mifsud, who I talk about a lot in the book, who's at the center of my case and the center of what was once known as the fake collusion narrative. This is the time when the FBI is trying to get FISA warrants on everybody. And I get an email from this guy, and he's like, I'm a Cambridge professor. I used to work for Reagan and some other guys. I'm going to pay you $3,000. I just want you to come out here and talk to me about the energy business. I fly to London. All of a sudden, things are starting to get very bizarre. He's introducing me to this honeypot. She's trying to basically suggest to me that if I give her some stuff on Russia, she's going to sleep with me. I mean, it was a very strange situation.
But Mrs. probably didn't like this coming out.
Luckily, I wasn't married at the time. I wasn't married to the beautiful woman I am now. But but even still, I was thinking I'm there on a business thing. This is Cambridge University, apparently. This isn't how things happen. So then I'm like, all right, that's just bizarre. Let me go talk to the professor the next day. And he starts bringing his phone out, putting it out in front of him, and starts asking me strange questions about Russian hacking and open-ended questions. Later on, we find out that this guy was wearing a wire. He was trying to get various guys in the Trump world to slip up with fake information that he was trying to insert in the conversation in order to get further warrants to spy on Trump himself.
So tell me about this first call with Sam Clovis, where you supposedly discussed Russia.
Yeah. So part of that conversation was basically like, we like your stuff in the energy world. I had a lot of ties to Israel. Okay, that's actually why I joined the Trump campaign and the Ben Carson campaign, because of my ties to the Israelis and to the Middle East. I had nothing to do with Russia. So then all of a sudden Sam Clovis says, but just so you know, Trump wants to work with Russia at some level. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. And if you're a foreign policy advisor, just get ready for that. And I said, all right, that's fine. I mean, it's not a crime to have a relationship with Russia, even if you're a president. It's not a crime to actually sit down and meet a president of Russia as a candidate. So that was the logic behind Sam Clovis's conversation with me. Nothing bad, nothing illegal about it.
Was your involvement with Sam Clovis picked up on a FISA at that time? Is that how they zeroed in on you?
I was under surveillance before joining the Trump campaign and while I was working on the Trump campaign with a FISA warrant on me. The whole thing was a conducted, pre-planned sabotage effort using the FBI, the full authority of the US intelligence apparatus, and foreign countries, as I explained in my book, the British, the Australians, and even some in Italy, who were working in tandem to make this fake scenario happen so that we would be, where the president's in limbo, his presidency might be questioned,
right,
and all of his associates would be going to jail like I did, or might be going to jail, and there might be further penalties.
In your book, you talk about how you didn't lie, but yet you pled guilty to a lie. Jerome Corsi was also issued a plea where they wanted to plead guilty to lying when they couldn't even charge the crime. So do you think the government knowingly let you plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit?
I'm 100% convinced of that. And that's why actually months before I was even going to jail, I was fighting back. I hired a new counsel. We were looking at all options. How are we going to withdraw the guilty plea? I don't know if you remember that, or it was in the media at the time, but I was trying to withdraw from my guilty plea. But my lawyers were basically telling me, let's try and do it, but it's so hard. I don't know if we can even get you out of it, even though we later found out, much too late, that all this was a complete hoax, a setup, and false evidence was used against me, and my story was completely mischaracterized to the world to make it seem like I was doing something wrong when I wasn't.
Our own government can spy on you and listen to your phone calls and read your emails and all this other good stuff if you're speaking to someone else who they allege is a foreign person of concern. And worse than that, they can go 2 hops from you. So if a FISA is on George and George talks to John, then they can go look at John and listen to John's calls and see if there's anything there. And if John talks to Frank, then they can also go listen to Frank's calls. So they get like a 3X on American citizens that they can illegally surveil, in my view. They shape it all into, here's the dossier, here's Papadopoulos, he's the guy, and it winds up that you and basically everyone you know is being surveilled by our own government. Is that right?
That's exactly right. You nailed it better than I've ever heard anybody on TV nail it the way you did. That's exactly what happened.
What are you doing these days to get your career restarted, and what's happening with you?
Yeah, so the book has taken up the last 6 months of my life. I've been really dedicated to making sure it comes out and looks great, and I hope America likes it. I'm in LA right now with my wife. She's pursuing, and I'm actually supporting my wife right now too, because she's had my back for so long, and she's been there with me when I was in Chicago, living in a horrible situation, my savings running out, and she didn't need to go through that. She's a lawyer, she's a beautiful woman, she didn't have to sit around and get involved in an FBI investigation herself, but she did. So right now she's in LA, and she...
That's a tough proposal, right?
It's a tough proposal.
I'm under investigation for being a foreign agent. I'm facing 25 years in prison. Would you marry me? How did that go?
Hey, maybe, some women like some weird adventure. I don't know. I laugh.
How was it working with Chevy Chase in Vacation?
Yeah, I lost a lot of money in being George Papagiorgio.
Nick Papagiorgio, that wasn't you.
I was George Papagiorgio.
I talked to one of my very good friends. She's Greek, and I went to her. I went to her wedding over the summer in Cyprus, and her last name is Zachariadis. And I said, "Do you know this guy?" She goes, "Stop it! We don't all know each other, but I probably know him." So following up on George Papadopoulos, we're lucky enough to have a few minutes with Simona Papadopoulos, wife of George. And you were one of the first wives that went out there and stuck up for your husband and went on TV and went on Hannity and said, "Hey, these guys are full of shit, and this is my husband's real story." And first, I asked George about this. You are dating a guy who gets arrested getting off a plane, told he's facing 25 years in jail for being a foreign agent. This is all news to you, I'm sure. And somehow you agree to marry him in the midst of this. So what's going through your mind on that one?
That's a very good question because everybody doesn't understand that I married him in the middle of this. I mean, I literally married him after his arrest. First of all, I believed in him. I knew the people in Europe that entrapped him in this operation. We fall in love in this process. He took me to a wonderful holiday in Europe. We were having this wonderful time during the summer. So I was completely in the blind stage of a relationship. We are completely, in love with somebody. And I found the whole story intriguing. Now people see George is incredibly smart, handsome, and so I said, you know what I want in life is an adventure.
Suave, charming, debonair.
Exactly. I'm adventure. I don't like flat life.
Well, it's been some adventure.
So
hasn't it?
I guess I jumped in this spy movie with him.
What's the stress, what's
very
the stress
stressful,
on you?
Very stressful. First of all, now he's telling the story as we know it now, but we were living the story. And while you live the story, you don't know how it's going to end up. We didn't know if he was going to serve more jail time. The time we were living together in Chicago, I could have lost him for 5 years.
So you were actually, in some ways, a target or a subject in the investigation because they're alleging that you made the introduction to George that put these people to create the fake story to get the FISA warrant.
That's what was speculated. In the beginning, the reason why I was out there was simply to say, no, wait a minute, you
got it all wrong.
You got it all wrong. And the second time, when they were weaponizing him as this puppet to make fall the President Trump, I knew his loyalty. I knew he never fall under FBI pressure. He never broke under the FBI pressure that were pushing him to lie, to entrap.
Are you Russian?
No, I'm Italian. I don't understand
Italian?
why. Yes.
Really? That's
Yes,
great.
I am.
I'm Italian.
Yeah, I was guessing you look Italian. You're
Well,
Napolitan?
you never know. Someone may
I am
watch the show
Napolitan
and
too.
mistake the accent. So,
Sono napoletana. Tu parli italiano?
fantastic. I'm Sicilian and I speak
Sicilian.
Spanish.
So we are both from the south. We are both from the south, but for some reason I became this Russia spy wife. This gives you the measure of how far they push this narrative, this fantasy. Everything is a fantasy, and now the truth is out in his book.
Tell our audience one great thing about George that he never gets to say about himself and that our viewers don't know about him.
The viewers should see his courage. He's brave, and that's the reason why it requires a lot of courage to expose what he's exposing. It's something that is huge. We're talking about the deep state, and thanks to him, America will get to know the truth. He's very brave, and to me, he's a hero.
This woman has some great courage too, because she stood by his side and married him while he's facing 25 to life. Mrs. Simona Papadopoulos giving us the other side of the story. Go out and get Deep State Target. Check out George's book. I hope you guys have a lifetime of great times in your kitchen and your life and your book sales and all this other stuff is great. And I want to thank you
So much.
very much for being
Thank
with
you.
us, giving your side of the story. Coming up right after this, we have our politics panel. You're watching What's the Deal? We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. You're watching What's the Deal? And now, like always, we bring you our legal eagles to break down the news of the week. And joining us tonight, Sam Braverman returns to What's the Deal? Defense attorney and former prosecutor. He's also a law professor at Pace University. And Judge Phil Straneri joins us. He's a retired supervising judge of the civil court in Richmond County, Staten Island, former acting Supreme Court justice. And guys, I want to thank you very much for joining us on What's the Deal? There's so much legal stuff in the news. Most of the news is overpopulated with these left-wing theories that they kind of get away from legal and get more into opinion. The Mueller report did not exonerate the president. That's the thing that they're hanging their hat on. Judge, in your experience, is a special counsel like Robert Mueller charged with weighing in on exoneration?
My understanding is that he's not. First of all, I don't understand why we've reached a point in our history where we have to have special counsels to investigate everything. Whatever happened to the Attorney General and the U.S. attorneys to do their jobs in an unbiased manner? But now every time there's some sort of dispute, special counsel, we want a special counsel. I think he delivered what he had to deliver within the parameters of the charge that he was given. And if he goes beyond it, then he's going to be criticized the other way. So, and it gives everybody a little chance to read. Now we have news for 2 more years while they argue over what the meaning of this is.
Sam, I made the point earlier in my open that I think, the left conveniently conflates these two things. Independent counsel, which was supposed to be responsive to the Congress, and the new law, special counsel, which Robert Mueller was charged under, which reports to the Attorney General as part of the Department of Justice. Is the left twisting this thing, or should Mueller have been charged with coming out and saying he's exonerated?
Well, I think the hard part is that everybody kind of forgot what the mission was as we waited for however many months it was, nearly a year, and there were lots of other indictments, and there were something like 2,400 subpoenas that were issued. So the report was enormously detailed. We haven't seen it. So we're still guessing what tomorrow's lottery numbers will be. And if I win, I'm not telling you guys what the numbers are going to be. But we're still kind of guessing because Barr has not yet released the report. Assume he releases the report, generally speaking, unredacted, we'll have a better sense of that. But to your point, I think we lost a little bit of what the original mission was as we talked about it with nothing to say for so long. We ran out of topics and we just kind of started guessing where it was going to be.
I feel like when I look at our elected officials, some of them are veterinarians, some of them are lifetime politicians, And it seems now that Gerald Nadler and Adam Schiff are going to open up these whole new investigations. What makes them think that they can investigate this stuff better than the Department of Justice?
They have the power of subpoena, right? You know, one of the things that I found amusing was on Friday, Nadler and several of the others we want this report right away. We need this immediately. Then on Sunday he comes out with the 4-page summary. They said, how could he put it out in 4 days? He must not have read it. So you can't have it both ways. And I think that goes a little bit to the disingenuousness of some of these people and the media, and everything that, you know, that Trump does has to be investigated and is not kosher.
Can they investigate better than the Department of Justice with unlimited resources?
I don't know. I mean, it's a tough question. We did Benghazi for a long time after the Department of State did investigation. We did Ken Starr for a very long time after the Department of Justice did investigation. It is part of our nature. Part of our nature is the very public way that we'll either humiliate each other or we'll drag each other through the mud. And if we don't have a chance to drag each other through the mud, I mean, we're really missing a good opportunity here.
The left says, well, he didn't weigh in on obstruction because the president can't be indicted. And there's a footnote in there where Barr says we didn't refer to that. In your view, can a president be indicted?
Yes, absolutely. There's nothing in the Constitution that says he cannot. And if he went out and he shot somebody, you could charge him with murder, 100%. He is not above the law, and that is a fundamental rule of our system. The Justice Department in the U.S. Attorney's Manual discusses whether or not there should be an indictment of a sitting president. That is a totally legitimate question, but it's not unconstitutional to do it. I also think, to take it one step farther, it's not unconstitutional for him to pardon himself, because the power of pardon in Article 2 says he has the power of pardon. It doesn't say for everybody else.
Let's go to the judge.
I think that's correct. But the political ramifications of that are what prevents you from doing something like that.
So in both of your view, the president can be indicted, but he can also pardon himself.
On federal things, I think.
Haven't they made a distinction that he can be indicted, but they can't go through with the prosecution until the term was over?
Right.
Because everybody would. Every time we want to remove a president from office, well, we'll get somebody to bring a criminal charge against him. We'll find a friendly prosecutor,
right,
and we'll effectively paralyze.
We'll get that prosecutor down in New Orleans who did the whole trial about whether or not Kennedy was shot by one or two people.
Jim Garrison.
This Jesse Smollett thing, right? The guy was obviously part of a conspiracy to create a fake crime, and the prosecutors in Illinois decide to let him walk, expunge the charges, pay 10 grand. What does this say about our justice system when someone who they know is guilty walks free and can stand out in front of the courthouse and claim that he did nothing wrong?
I think part of the problem is, one, he didn't say he did anything wrong. And I think in America, we forgive people. You fess up to what you did, we'll forgive you, and you move on. He hasn't done that. I think that galls a lot of people. On the other hand, if in fact we would have had this result 6 months from now, because this is how they handle the stuff in Cook County, maybe they made the right call, let him do it. Or if they said, he has really serious mental health issues, and he's going to get them dealt with. And again, I think people would take a different view of it. But it looks like there are rumors that someone on the Michelle Obama's staff made a phone call. I don't know if that's going to be investigated, if it happened, didn't happen, but it gives a bad taste to a lot of people.
If Illinois has, as a statute, a diversionary program, you can be completely guilty of the crime. Being guilty of the crime is not a barrier to the program. You could have done it 100% 4 ways to Sunday and you're guilty. But you get a diversion if you qualify in a certain number of ways. And one of the conditions of that diversion can be restitution. So I don't know Smollett. But if Smollett is paying $10,000 as a kind of a liquidated damages amount of restitution, here's what the city's out, I'm going to make a $10,000 payment, and I otherwise am eligible by all the statutes, then he's entitled exactly what he gets. And in some sense, just to what the judge is saying, like in New York, we have an adjournment in contemplation of dismissal. Right. You could be charged with a crime. The DA's office could agree to say, your case, limited to your case, we're going to have a diversion. You're going to stay out of trouble for 6 months. You're going to do the following 10 things.
And you never admit guilt.
Never admit guilt.
Guys, thank you very much for joining us. Sam Braverman, Supreme Court Justice Trenary. Thank you guys
Thank you.
for joining
Good seeing
us.
you again.
Hopefully
As
we'll have
always.
you back again soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
You stay right there. Watch these commercials real quick. Support our sponsors, otherwise we won't be here anymore. We'll be back in 2 minutes. You're watching What's the Deal? Welcome back. Tonight from the center we have Andre Barnett with us. Andre is an Army veteran. He's a businessman and a former Reform Party nominee for U.S. President. And on the right we have Vicky Palladino. You may know her from her social media fame. She's viral. She's Vicky. She's a community organizer. She's an activist in Queens, New York, right here. And she was a Republican candidate for New York State Senate. Guys and ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight on What's the Deal. This show comes to you from New York City. And they say if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And now Bill de Blasio is trying to make New York City the first city in the world that implements congestion pricing, where people will pay to drive their cars into Manhattan, not for the toll for the bridge, not for the toll for the tunnel, to get into New York City. And this is probably coming to a city near you very soon. Andre, where are we going in New York City and on the progressive left when we're taxing people to drive into metropolitan areas?
Well, we're getting that socialist mentality, and we're really trying to force an issue that's not there. So we want you to pay just to transport yourself. I think Ocasio-Cortez, you know, she's kind of being amplified here. It's crazy that you would try to force somebody to pay an amount of money just to travel through the town. These aren't toll roads. There's nothing like that. In fact, if you look at New York City streets, I don't think they've taken care of them in
Right.
a number of decades.
Fix the potholes and then maybe I'll pay a toll. Vicky, I live in Staten Island, New York. And to get back to my house, it cost me $19.
Exactly.
I
yes.
drive into Manhattan every
That's
day
right.
to run my business,
Exactly.
to come here and host my show. And now the toll is, I got to pay $19 just to get home.
Now, and you're above the average Joe. So what you have to do is that purple country and that purple weight, unfortunately, doesn't exist here in New York. We're past purple, we're blue. We are not purple here. The people who live here might be considered purple. However, the mayor is not purple. The mayor is blue. The mayor is a socialist. The mayor is trying to implement his socialistic ways upon the middle class that's choking to death anyway. What is congestion pricing? Congestion pricing is a backdoor tax.
That's right.
That struggles for the middle class. That budget that passed upstate New York for $175 billion was passed while you and I were asleep just the other night. So when we woke up in the morning, you found out you have to pay $19 to get over the Verrazano Bridge. We all found out about congestion pricing as a reality. Okay, we found out that Governor Cuomo got a 40% raise.
That's what I was
in
going to
his
say.
salary.
They keep hitting us. Property taxes in New York City and New York State continue to go up. And while we need all this money, a recent article in the New York Post said that over $9 billion of revenue is running out of New York State. Andre, tell me where we're headed with this.
Well, honestly, people like myself who are business owners, like you who are business owners, you're gonna get to a point where you can't take it anymore. It's choking the life out of your business. So we're going to leave. What you're going to have is a socialistic society here in New York that's going to self-implode. You're going to have a lot of people, you know, if you've ever watched the show Mad Max, it's one of my favorite, where you have all these people in all the garbs, driving these raunchy cars, running into everything. It's a free-for-all. That's what it's going to be in New York. That's what happens. Look at Venezuela. Look at all of these peoples the places that have socialistic governments, socialist societies. That's what happens.
The socialist experiment has been a failure everywhere it's been tried.
Yep.
Throughout history. I think at this point I might take Mel Gibson as mayor over de Blasio
I would take Minnie
from
Mouse.
Mad Max. But, I wanna hit another topic. Just a couple of weeks ago, a former lieutenant governor candidate from Nevada said Joe Biden came up behind her, sniffed her hair, and kissed her on the back of the head. Now a second woman comes forward to accuse him of inappropriate behavior. Amy Lapos says that in 2009, at a fundraiser for a congressman she was working for. Biden put his hand around her neck, pulled her close, and rubbed noses with her at a fundraiser. And this follows the Lucy Flores allegations that he kissed the back of her head and sniffed her hair. Is this enough to sink Biden's presidential hopes?
I don't think so. I think Biden, he probably just made a mistake and thought it was one of his grandkids. I don't think it's going to sink him. As far as that's concerned, you've got too many of these Me Too movements going on. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe that you can discredit anything that a woman says. But what I do believe is, again, you're innocent until proven guilty. Joe Biden, he's creepy Uncle Bob, but I don't think he did anything. I don't think he did anything.
The only thing is, the only problem I have is, had he had an R after his name,
he would have been sunk.
They would have been hanging this guy from the rafters. Okay, so creepy Uncle Joe has been creepy Uncle Joe forever. Even Whoopi Goldberg on The View, when she came out in defense of this lady, why are you bringing something up that happened 5 years ago? Well, why'd you bring up what Trump did 30 years ago?
Right.
Okay, why doesn't the foot fit in the same shoe? Ladies, I don't wear a pink hat. I don't need to wear a pink hat.
Well, you have such beautiful hair. Why would you wear a pink hat?
Thank you very much. But my point is,
ruin all your style.
there you go. But my point is, I don't stand
Can
on
I say
the
you have
gender
beautiful
code.
hair, or is that
No, this is mine.
Oh, no,
Oh,
but
yeah,
I'm saying,
never
can I
did.
say it's beautiful?
You could
Because
say, of course. Well,
never
no,
know
I
what
don't
you're
fall
allowed to
into
say
that
anymore
sexist
these days.
anything.
One last topic before we go, guys. The president is visiting the border this week. He's talking about shutting down the border this week. We talked a little earlier in the show today with Tim Chapman about New York State. We have legislators agreeing to let illegal aliens vote. You're a veteran. You're a former candidate for national office. What's happening at the border that these people think it's okay to give illegal immigrants rights that are...
What's happening is they're trying to empower themselves and to get themselves reelected and ensure that they have a lifelong election or a lifelong stint in office. When you can allow these people in and they can get whatever they want for free, who do you think they're going to vote for? And that's what they're banking on. They're now putting out legislation, like you said, to let illegal aliens vote. We can't stem that. We can't restrict their voices of what they're saying. And the problem is, yeah, we should. They're not U.S. citizens. They under the Constitution, their rights are very limited.
Well, right? I don't think they have any rights. If someone's here illegally and they are permitted to vote, how do we know who they are? If
you don't, because
they're undocumented, how do we know who they are?
Yeah, just by what they did with giving undocumented, they took the first step by allowing, because we can't call them illegals, it's not allowed. It's politically incorrect.
Unfortunately, I'm politically
but they
direct,
are illegal.
not in.
Okay,
Well,
they're not illegal.
I use the term
we'll go
on the show.
undocumented if that makes
That's
you
what
happy,
they
whatever
are.
you want to do.
No,
Okay.
I think
So
they're
here
illegal immigrants.
They're here illegally.
As a service-disabled veteran, it sickens me to see what we're putting our military through.
That's right.
All of the things that people are saying about them, how they accuse them of murder and all
horrible.
of these. And I'm looking at it saying, wait a minute. These are the people that fight so you can say those kind of things. Right. These are people that lay down their lives online. It sickens me to the core. And I said, here's what I'd love for you to do. I'd love for you to take a trip to Iraq, watch these little kids. I saw, and I just spoke about this with my wife a couple of days ago. Beautiful little girl in Iraq. Oddly enough, she had sandy brown or blondish hair. She's carrying an AK-47.
Wow.
Couldn't have been any more than 6 or 7 years old. This is what you're looking for here. This is what you're trying to bring to the U.S.
Well, the state of affairs is out of control, and the state of this segment is fantastic. Vicky, you're always a great character to have on the show. Your views are so amazing. No, well, you're a standout. You're one of a kind. I don't mean
That's
character,
very nice.
but I know you
yes,
through
you do.
many things.
Yes.
But I
thank you for that.
I appreciate. There's not that many people that are forthright and say how they really feel, and you're a breath of fresh air. I want to thank you guys very much for joining me. Vicky, thank you for being here. We'll have you guys back again.
Look forward to it.
Thank you for tuning in to our politics segment. Stay right there. We'll be back in 2 minutes with our Entrepreneur Spotlight. You're watching What's the Deal, the show that doesn't kneel. We'll be back. Hey, welcome back. You're watching What's the Deal. I'm John Tobacco. This week in the Entrepreneur Spotlight, we have Megan Kress and Chris Hughes with us. They're the co-founders of Quotable Capital. Megan and Chris, thank you for joining us this week on What's the Deal in the Entrepreneur Spotlight. You guys are the founders of Quotable Capital. That's right. You guys are embracing this great new phenomenon that the world is learning about more and more every day. This week seems to be a comeback week for Bitcoin.
I think spring has sprung.
Spring has sprung, or there's one large manipulative buyer out there, however you want to look at it. If you're thinking about investing in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, any of the top cryptocurrencies, educate yourself, beware of scammers, make sure you're buying on a legitimate exchange, and whatever you're spending, make sure you're prepared to lose every last cent.
I mean, like,
that's kind of what
just
I
like in
tell
any
my
market,
audience,
right?
Tell our audience what Quotable is doing. Like, what's the nuts and bolts of what your business? You guys are innovators, you're entrepreneurs. What is it you're doing to make this new economy work?
Take like a real estate investment. Imagine that being, rather than buying a share, you're buying a digital representation of that. Securities tokens are like debt, they are equity, they are assets, they are revenue. They are one of that 4 categories. We are making them digital tradable units.
I talk to our audience a lot, and many people who own stocks don't even know this, but you have no proof of ownership.
That's right.
On a current security.
Yeah.
You own a piece of paper that says you have shares in your account that are held by someone else. You have this daisy chain of claims, but you have no empirical ownership. And what you guys are doing at Quotable is you're creating a digital membership unit where you have empirical ownership of that percentage pro rata in your wallet. So you own it. You don't have to ask 7 different people if you can have your stuff back so you can sell it to someone.
We've built a software platform that walks you through purchasing a US Treasury bill. And then based on watching you do it, we then in turn give you a KYC stamp. Now, all of our customers are investors in the US federal government. They're buying our debt. Like, our dollars are actually just notes against treasuries. The Federal Reserve is a private company that mints dollars that then in turn is pegged to underlying US Treasury.
Quotable Capital has created a smooth on-ramp where regular Americans can purchase US Treasury instruments.
Yeah, I mean, from
and
the
the
Treasury,
Know Your Customer is done by the federal government.
Come on now. Like, how, like, every one of our customers is buying into America. Isn't that like, are we making it super great? Like,
but, and now imagine when we have foreign participation and they purchase the same way. That the innovation that's happening here in this country when founders use our technology to issue. And they spin up a node and they issue themselves. We've built issuance technology that allows attorneys to deploy for their clients onto the blockchain.
We got to wrap up this segment, but I want to thank you guys for coming down here tonight and joining us on What's the Deal. I want to have you guys back. Keep in touch. Let me know about any great developments. We'll have you down, talk to our audience about it. They're going to have epic news for you and me and all of us very soon. I want to thank you guys for joining us on What's the Deal. I want to thank you for tuning in another week of What's the Deal. You stay right there. Keep your DVR tuned. If you didn't DVR the show yet, DVR it now. And if you got an idea, an innovation, an entrepreneurial business that you're just starting, reach out. You can email me right here, jt@thetokenteam.com, and we'll be responsive. You may be sitting right here until their epic news comes. We're going to have some spots open. Thanks for tuning into What's the Deal. We'll see you again next week.